So the Rebbe goes on in the second paragraph on the page 294. I'm sorry, third paragraph, second column. So he's saying that the person is doing this type of natural vessel as a vehicle and an instrument of Hashem's command, or as Hashem sending down his brachas to him. That's why it's permitted. It doesn't fall into the category of Orur HaGever. But it does say Lo Yikavel Ish. At the cusp of the redemption, our Torah says, even this higher level, where a person looks to man for their parnasa because Hashem sends his parnasa through man, even that won't be there. So he says in the third paragraph of Zeh Toichen HaChidush Bizman HaGula, that's the content of the novelty in the time of the redemption. Like it says also in our Haftorah, Oz Yir Ketal Meis Hashem Goymer. Then everything will come from Hashem like dew comes from Hashem. She'ein ba la'olam aidei adam. We know that dew has nothing to do with a person, not even spiritually. Tal loimetzer, tal, dew never stops. When it comes to rain, we need a dam for rain, but dew comes from above. She'ein ba la'olam aidei adam. It doesn't come down to the world through a human being. Rashi says over there on that pasuk, "V'yivakshu b'nei adam alav," and people do not ask and daven for dew. Kach le'yikavu Yisrael le'ezus ish kiyim la'Hashem. So to the Yidden, do not hope for any man's type of help, only Hashem. And we'll soon explain how that fits in with going to work. The person still has to go to work, but it's a different attitude, as we'll soon explain. The Rebbe says the difference between these two things, what's prohibited and what's better not, that prohibited is actually believing that the other person is the instrument and the source of my parnasa, of my money. Whereas believing that the person is an instrument for Hashem to send my money, and even that is not the ideal on the cusp of Mashiach's coming. So he says this is the difference between two different psukim that it says. Al derech, in the brackets he says, al derech, similar to what it says. Bir Teres Chassidus. The explanation in Teres Chassidus b'pasuk, in the pasuk, Toiv lachzis b'Hashem eptech ba'adam. It is better to shield oneself, to hope, to place one's trust in Hashem, than trusting in Adam. It's a very interesting expression. It's better. Didn't we say you're not allowed to trust in a person? Cursed is a person that trusts in a person and man. Why do you say that it's better? From the expression, it's better to shield oneself in Hashem than trusting in Adam. Moving is understood that also trusting in Adam, in man, is a permitted thing. Also, this is a manner of acting. Even though it's a permitted thing to trust in man, to shield oneself in man, it's better to shield oneself in Hashem. What does that mean? The pirush batuach ba'adam hudai, or b'toyach ba'adam, the meaning in trusting in a person is ba'adam ha'elyon, in the level known as supernal man. Supernal man is the level of the spheres, the levels of godliness that are similar to and correspond to the levels down here. That we say, just like a person has 10 koiches and nefesh, so too there's Adam ha'elyon, supernal man, that also has 10 spheres, etc., etc. So it's talking about bechinas memalek olam, that's a level of godliness that fills the world. That's one level of trust that a person can have. From the perspective of a malach olam, a person needs to put in an effort to make a vessel and a garment in the rules and ways of nature, that in those vessels will reside and descend the bracha of Hashem. That is the Mamala Kolam perspective, because Mamala Kolam, since it is a godly life force that's finite and permeates the world, so the world has significance and importance. That's why we only say it's better to shield oneself in Hashem, Bechina Soiv Kolam. That's the level of Soiv Kolam that transcends the worlds. The spiritual worlds as well. From the perspective of Soiv Kolam, there is no need in putting in effort in the rules of nature. He, Hashem, will sustain you, and Yichalkelecha is also related to the word Keli. HaKadosh Baruch Hu oise gamas hakeli. Hashem makes the vessels. You don't have to make the vessels. That is not exactly what we're talking about over here. Over here, both levels that we're going to talk about, the person is making vessels. But in that level, the Chassidus is talking about, there's a level where we're making vessels and a level beyond of our making vessels, similar to what it says about the difference between Yosef and Yaakov. Not going to go into that right now. But what are these two levels in work and my attitude towards work? If even the lower level, I'm cognizant of the fact that Hashem is sending me the parnasa, the money, via this person, so I know it's ultimately not the person that's giving me the money, it's all Hashem. So he says as follows: Tachlis hakavana, the ultimate purpose is einish ban hagis hatevat is battle. That doesn't, the intention is not that nature should cease. Ela adrab, just the opposite. We want nature to exist. Levader ulahalis anogis hateva, to refine and to elevate the way nature runs. Ad sheyagoli lein koil, until it's revealed to all shagam hatevam yuchdim hakadosh baruch hu, that even nature is joined with Hashem. Umezem moving binyaneinu, from this understood in our topic shapirish bevelo yikava liish. The meaning where it says that they will not hope to man, it doesn't mean that we will stop working, at least again at the time of the Ascholas HaGeula, that we won't have any type of help from a man, but rather at that time, at the cusp of Mashiach's coming, nature itself will be completely joined with his godliness. Until what is evident in nature, only godliness. You will not mistake, you will not see, you will not have to meditate and figure out, behind this help that I got from a person, there's Hashem over here. The explanation in what this is behegden by first prefacing Inyan the idea of Hashem will bench you in all that you do, that we have an obligation to do work to make a vehicle for Hashem's brachas. So it says there's two approaches to it. Aleph, one approach is, though a person knows that nature on its own has no independent existence. And nature is only like an axe in the hand of the wood chopper, just like the axe has no nature or anything of its own, and you don't thank the axe for giving you wood, you will thank or pay the wood chopper. And the same thing, when he looks at nature, he realizes nature is only being manipulated by Hashem. He doesn't believe that the rules of nature is what gave him whatever he needs. Still in all, since Hashem commanded him, it's a mitzvah. He has to work to make a vessel in the rules of nature. So nature occupies some importance by him. But why is nature important to him? Not because of nature itself is important. Rather because of Hashem's command. Nature receives importance. Nature is considered important in his eyes because Hashem said he has to value it and use it and that's the way how he's going to send down his brachas. But it's all Hashem's doing. That's one approach. The second approach is the person's involvement in nature is only because Hashem commanded him to do so. Again, this is not just going to work. This means whatever we're doing to take care of our health or shidduchim or anything else that we need to do in nature to be able to attain. I'm only doing this because Hashem commanded me to do it. Nature does not have any importance in his eyes whatsoever. He sees it only as a means through which to fulfill the will of his creator. Just like a person that does a mitzvah. They don't see that the mitzvah has any other component to it other than the mitzvah itself. You're davening, the mitzvah is davening. It's not about anything else. The same thing, I have a mitzvah to go to work. I have a mitzvah to take care of my health. I have a mitzvah to do other things to ensure my existence in the physical world. But it has no value in and of itself. It's only because Hashem commanded me to do it. This is the explanation, what the Chazal say on the pasuk. It'll be your faith in times. And munna ze seder zroim, that Chazal say that the faith and belief is referring to the order in the Mishnah that deals with agricultural laws, literally seeds, different things having to do with the rules and halachas of planting. And Chazal explained what is emunah and the order of zroim connected with each other. Shemamin b'chei ha'olam b'zereh. Because a person trusts in the life of all the worlds in Hashem, and he sows and he plants. So the Rebbe says, seemingly planting is a very natural activity. You need to believe in Hashem to plant. This is a natural thing. After planting, after sowing, so then things grow. It makes no difference even who is planting, meaning belief plays no role in the actual growth. Yehudi, whether a Yid plants, or Lahavdaleni Yehudi, or Lahavdal non-Jew is planting, even if the planting took place, the sowing took place, because a kernel, a seed, fell into the ground, and it sunk down the earth on its own, and it'll grow. No man was involved in it. And therefore, definitely, no belief and trust in Hashem was enabling this growth. Why? Because that's the nature of the earth, to give forth and to make things grow. Yisayim is even more so. Because the nature was set in the ground in such a manner, like the pasuk says, that the planting time and the harvest time will not cease. That Hashem promised the world after the flood, that even though during the flood all the seasons ceased, but he said never again will it cease. So in other words, this is now the nature embedded in the world, that when you plant, it grows. Mikol Makim, despite that, he says in the last paragraph, La'achri calls after all of the above, Ein hateva mekabel chashivus v'tfisus makim be'enov shel Yehudi. Nature does not have any importance and value in the eyes of a Yid. V'kasher uzareya, when he plants, Ein hu oises zois mepnei shal pi teva hazriya tavil tzmicha. Yid doesn't plant because the nature of planting is that it brings to growth. It's only because he believes in the life of the world in Hashem, that's why he's planting. So in other words, this is the second higher approach, that it's all coming from his belief. It's all coming from his connection to Hashem. Since it's coming from his connection to Hashem, so then Hashem told him, this is the way I want you to make a living. So he does it. In the parlance of Chassidus, he does it b'Kabbalah soil. He goes to work like he does any other mitzvah. Okay, this is all wonderful and great, and and very special, but what's the difference if my approach is that I give importance and value to working on its own, but I realize that this is an instrument for Hashem, or if I initially see this as a mitzvah of Hashem? What's the difference if I have in those two attitudes? So the Rebbe says there's actually going to be a very practical difference that's going to impact the person's day-to-day life and observance of mitzvahs. Hey, the difference between these two approaches, it's not just in the manner that the midah of Bitochon is taking place, but it's also and how the person feels about his Bitochon Hashem. It also descends from it a difference in an actual way of doing things, both in his thought, and his speech, and his action. Someone that in their eyes, the mitzvah that Hashem told us that you need to work, something separate from Hashem's bracha that resides in it, and nature is important and occupies value and importance by him. So the command you shall do and the Torah mitzvahs are two separate matters when it comes to him. Therefore, when some type of challenge and some type of contradiction arises of either or, either I will do Torah mitzvahs, or I'll be involved in whatever nature tells me I need to do to be able to make a living. For example, he thinks to himself, if I will daven at length, I'm liable to lose customers in my business, because the customers I could come to the business, no one's there. Or or if he will be going an extra hider of tzedakah, of giving a lot of tzedakah, perhaps he won't have enough money to invest further in the business. There's many types of examples where a person sees a challenge from his work to his Torah mitzvahs. And by the person, it's in a way of when this one is stronger, the other one is weaker. In other words, the Kedusha is stronger at the expense of Klippa, and so to the opposite. Even if he forgoes being involved in the ways of nature. By knowing the bracha of the Eibishter makes him rich. And the ways of nature are only a vessel and a garment for the bracha of Hashem. He's involved in Torah mitzvahs. All of this comes about in a way of a war and overpowering nefesh habahamis. In other words, like this: even if when he comes to that choice between davening longer or giving more tzedakah, and he's victorious and he gives more tzedakah, despite the fact that he may be worried that he'll have less money to invest, or despite the fact that he's worried that if he davens longer, he will miss out on some customers, but still it's a way of a war. And when you're dealing with a war, it's always possible that a person can be thrown down in the war. Well, there's always existing the possibility that's always possible, the possibility that will happen by him, that a nation over another nation will be strong, to the opposite, that the opposite one will overpower him. But in a time when the doing and the making the vessel has no importance by him whatsoever, he just sees it as a mitzvah like any other mitzvah. He's the only reason why he's going to work is because Hashem wants him to go to work, So it comes out there's very going to work or doing any other natural means for what he needs. That itself is a service of Hashem. Once that itself is a service of Hashem, avurei for him, v'chol masecha v'chol drachecha einam inyan nifred mol shem shemayim v'da'eyu, and all your actions and all your ways are not something separated from the being for the sake of heaven and to know Hashem. They are permeated internally with for the sake of heaven and to know Him until they become entirely one with Hashem. Since by this person that's doing the kalim of parnasa on a higher level, and there is nothing else except Hashem's will, moving, it's understood. One mitzvah, the mitzvah of going to work, cannot contradict another mitzvah of davening longer, or giving more tzedakah, or having shiurim and learning, etc., etc. Al-adrab, just the opposite. One mitzvah will not just not be contradictory to another mitzvah, but just the opposite. Mitzvah gereres mitzvah. One mitzvah draws another mitzvah in its wake. The difference between these two types of approaches is subtle enough that it can creep up on a person slowly, and we need to nip it in the bud so that the negative result that we spoke about previously doesn't come about. The difference between these two approaches does not begin in a revealed way in matters of actually doing. Hayitzahara doesn't come initially to convince a Yid to transgress, heaven forbid, on Hashem's will. It begins from a hair's breadth. Hayoim, today, Baschola, at the beginning, Hayitzahara mamid panim, the Yitzahara presents himself Kimisha maskim, as someone that agrees sheisaskus bedarki ateva also shtir bestir lakim atayra mitzvahs. Yitzahara dresses himself like the Rebbe says nazayin lezupitze. He dressed himself in a silk kapota, and he says, sure, of course, heaven forbid that the ways of nature and involving in business should somehow be contradictory to Torah mitzvahs. The only thing the Yitzhak says, but remember, Vurak Madgish, he emphasizes that the Torah gives room and importance for nature. Once he's planted that seed in the Yid's mind, tomorrow, like it says, tomorrow, eventually, he makes that the ways of nature is primary. Like my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe explained in Maimer Chazal, in the statement of Chazal, this is the profession of the Yitzhahara. Today he said, do like this. The simple thing is, the simple pshat in this Maimer Chazal is like this. Today says, do just this, a small thing. Then and then afterwards he tells him, do another thing, a bigger thing. And then eventually he tells him, go bow down to idols. Comes the Frierdiker Rebbe and says, the original kach that the Chazal are referring to, I'm not referring to something that's against Hashem, like we were just saying. Hayitzahara in a maskal b'shidul ha'yehudi lasis as a hepech merotzna amiti. A Yitzhahara does not begin with convincing a Yid from doing the opposite of Ritzoynei Ha'amiti, of the true will of the Eibishter v'laver chashom al rotzna elyon, transgress, heaven forbid, on the supernal will. Adrab, just the opposite. Who Aimer Loi, the Yitzhahara tells Maseikach, do it this way, do like Hashem told you to do. Who maskim sheyehudi yekayim Torah mitzvahs. He agrees that a Yid should fulfill Torah mitzvahs. V'hu masbir lo, and he explains to him keitzad dvarim elu miskablim al pi haseichel shnefesh habamas v'yetzer, that doing Torah mitzvahs makes sense even according to the intellect of the nefesh habamas and the Yetzer Hara. but he stuck himself into something that's not his business. And by sticking himself into something that's not his business, eventually he starts telling him deis in other things and pulling him away from Torah mitzvahs. Through the Yetzer Hara of Shabbamis, mixing in his own existence in the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. He gets the person to be in the habit that he should agree, or that he should need the agreement of the Yetzer Hara. He wants to have Shabbat and should also agree. So therefore, by becoming accustomed to getting the Yetzer Hara's agreement, maybe also he brings him in such a state that tomorrow he tells him like this, and then next thing you know, he's telling him to do Avodah Zarah. Therefore, the way to really protect oneself from the schemes of the Yetzer Hara is not by doing things according to nature. Because the rational understanding, rational reasoning, because reason and understanding allow place for the existence of nature. But rather, the true way of protecting oneself from the Yetzer Hara schemes is through bittul and self-sacrifice to the supernal will, beyond reason and knowledge, in such a way that there is no other entity by the person other than Hashem's will. So once it's baked into the person, it's embedded into the person that there's no other entity except for Hashem's will, then there's no room, there's no opening for the Yetzer Hara to inflict his views and opinions. Similar to, again, it's only similar to the difference that we had earlier between shielding oneself in Hashem and trusting in man. From the perspective of trusting in man that we spoke about earlier in the Sichos that's talking about trusting in Memalek Olam is similar to the level of doing things according to reason. There needs to be put in the effort in the ways of nature, because that's what Memalek Olam says. There's nature, there's a world, there's something you have to deal with. Because from the perspective of Memalek Olam, the ways of nature have a place, have a room. As opposed to from the perspective of shielding oneself in Havaya, in the level that transcends the worlds. What level is that in the service of Hashem? That's a level that transcends the world. It's a bittul that's beyond reason and knowledge. The ways of nature do not occupy any place by him. Therefore, the order is that he will sustain you. But even more so, he will give you the kelim, as we said before. Yichal Kalecha in the word keli. True, there are vessels. They come from above. Similar to what we said before. Even when the person is involved in the ways of nature, they have no value in his eyes, to such a degree. There's no room at all whatsoever to say that a person is going to assist him. Because the ways of nature are entirely one with Hashem. There's no Yikav Leish. There's no hoping to a person. The person is nothing. It's all Hashem working through that person. So now getting back to the fact that we said that right before Mashiach comes, at the time of Das Chalas HaGeula, that's the level that the Yidden will be at. This is also the explanation for the fact that the preparation for the redemption is they will not hope for man, but at that time will be completely removed the concealment and covering of nature. Ad Yira be'ene basar till it's visible in the eyes of flesh. Echateva gufo alakus, how nature itself is godliness, and because it will be open and visible to all, the connection between nature and Hashem. Therefore, the way we will act will be like the dew is coming from Hashem. We won't even think that it's any person is helping me. He will not hope for man and not look forward to children of men. Similar to what it says, and he will sustain you and he will make the kalim for you. We're going to skip over to Ois Tes. That's page 8 of the copies. Second column by the Ois Tes over there. This is also the lesson, the Yom Achreinu Shel Zman HaGolus, to the final days of the time of Golus. The time of preparation to entering Eretz Yisrael through Mashiach. Though we are still placed in the double and quadruple darkness of the time of exile, the opposite of the beginning of redemption, like we see with our senses, that how it's the opposite of the beginning of redemption, not like over in the Haftarah where it speaks about how we will be completely trampling all the nations, etc. Sadly, we're not even at that point yet. We're not even at the point of the Haftarah. We're in the complete darkness of Golus. Calls I still in all. Since all matters of Mashiach's times are dependent on our actions and service throughout the entire duration of Golus. Especially in this generation. That it's made and it's being done the final preparations for the redemption through Mashiach. Which is mighty chami admor, like this statement and the phrase of my father-in-law, Mashiach that Mashiach is standing behind our wall. And not only that, you say to Mazu even more so. The Frierdiker Rebbe said that the walls of exile are burning. In other words, they're completely coming apart. There has to be at least something similar to this not hoping to man, of every single one. There should not be any value and importance to the ways of nature. And the trust has to be only in Hashem. Top of the next column. Through having that focus and that mindset, every single person will be redeemed from all the worries and the things that confuse him and bother him. When the person's involvement in everything you do is only to fulfill the supernal will, he's not preoccupied with this, and this doesn't bother him. And all that matters to him is the fulfillment of the supernal will. This individual redemption, that the person is becoming redeemed through his own avodah from all of his own issues with his own internal exile, is then he came. This is also a preparation and a vessel to the general redemption through Mashiach, until it's a day of entirely Shabbos and rest for everlasting life.